Okay, we're starting Parshas Vayigash. So the background, page 250. The backdrop is that the brothers have gone back and forth, and there's been this. They find the last stage of Yosef's Yosef's pulling this intrigue on the brothers. And the last thing we saw is that Yosef, what do you call it? Binyamin is taken. They find the goblet. The goblet, yeah. They find the goblet in Binyamin's knapsack, and now Yosef says to the brothers at the very end of Parshas Miketz, he says, Yehuda says to Yosef, "All right, listen, you caught us all. And we'll all be slaves to you. We'll all be slaves. After all, you caught us fair and square. And there's a rule in law that if one guy in the room is doing something illegal, everybody in the room gets tagged. If you're in a room with somebody who's doing drugs and you had no intent, like everybody in the room somehow never has intent. It's only the guy who's doing it. But one way or another, you had no intent. You didn't even know about it. But there's one guy in the room who's got illegal firearms, and whatever. Everybody gets arrested. If you're with him, you're considered part of the group. So Yehuda says to Yosef at the end of Parshas Miketz, he says, "You're right. You got us. You nabbed us fair and square, and we are now going to serve you. You will all be your servants." And Yosef says, "No, chas v'shol, chalila that I should do something like that. All of you go free. The one that I found it with, he's the one that I am going to take as my servant. It's Binyamin." That's how Parshas Miketz ends. So then you go to Parshas Vayigash, and it starts, Vayigash elav Yehuda. Yehuda approaches him. Vayomer bi adoni. Yedaber na'avdecha dover b'zeh. I want to tell you something. Val yichar apcha b'avdecha. Don't get angry, ki chamocha kefar, because you are like Paro. This is the proverbial, with all due respect. When anybody ever says to you, with all due respect, it means you're about to be insulted. And anybody says, with all due respect, you're incompetent. Right? With all due respect. With all due respect. So whenever you say that, or you hear that, if you're on the receiving end of it all, with all due respect, get ready to get insulted. So Yehuda says, please don't get angry, but. And he approaches Yosef over here. Now, first of all, the Medrash says that when Yehuda and Yosef went at it, the Medrash uses a funny expression. The Medrash says the two kings went at it, and the other brothers stood back in awe. And Yosef and Yehuda are referred to as the two kings. And the two kings start going at it with each other. The other brothers were awestruck. What was it that awestruck them? I mean, if you look at the Medrash, it sounds like, the Medrash that Yehuda yelled. There was blood coming out of his eyes. He was so angry. The brothers started stomping and shaking the palace. The Medrash goes into very graphic descriptions of physical intimidation tactics on both sides. But the real awe that the brothers found awe-inspiring here is that Yehuda and Yosef are both kings. What defines them as being kings? It's their level of self-control, which we've spoken about many times. Yehuda had the self-control and the strength of character to go and admit in public that he was the father in the paternity suit. Again, that was very embarrassing. And Yosef has the strength of character to run away from Mrs. Potiphar. So these are kings. That's what makes them suitable to be kings. And we're going to find that the Davidic line down the line is going to come from the tribe of Yehuda. And Yehuda now goes to bat for Binyamin, which also we're going to see this creates an eternal bond between Yehuda and Binyamin, which is very interesting. Binyamin is the one who's taken. Yehuda goes to bat for him. Yehuda has taken responsibility for Binyamin. Later on, what are we going to find? The Beis Hamikdash is built, and the Beis Hamikdash is built in the portion of Binyamin, but it borders on the portion of Yehuda. They're neighbors with each other. And then later on, when the Jewish people split, and you have the 10 tribes go to one side, and you have 2 tribes go to the other side, who is it? It's Yehuda and Binyamin. So there's some sort of spiritual bond that's formed from Yehuda in the bond, going to bat for Binyamin right over here. Nothing happened there. No coincidences. No coincidences in Torah. So Yehuda now approaches Yosef. And why is it now that Yehuda takes it up? What is it that Yehuda is bothered by something? And this is really the key to the whole thing. And I mean, at a certain point, Yehuda says, okay, I've had about enough. Why? Up until now, he was willing, he said, listen, look what changed. He says, we'll all be slaves. Yosef says, no. You go home, I'll only keep Binyamin. So it would seem he's doing him a favor, no? He's letting him off the hook. He's letting 9 out of 10 off the hook. To the contrary. Why are you getting upset about that? If I want all 10 of you to be slaves, that'll certainly hurt Yaakov Avinu. I'm letting you go. I'm only going to keep the guy where we found the goblet in his knapsack, or wherever they found it. Why should Yehuda? That triggers Yehuda off. Why?
Because maybe he felt it was more personal.
What do you mean by?
In the sense that he offered his brothers, even Yehuda himself was like the strongest of his brothers.
Right.
He said, this viceroy of Egypt doesn't want me and my brothers are so stronger, but he's going for the youngest of us that can barely lift the rock, maybe?
Oh, very close. Very good. And yeah, what do you say?
He doesn't want his dad to lose Rachel's favorite wife. So he doesn't want to lose like
But he's going to lose them anyway. If they all stay there, he loses them, and if this way, he loses them. But now Yaakov's going to lose everybody.
It feels like a repeat of Joseph.
It could be a repeat of Joseph, but the other way is a repeat of Joseph with the brothers. There's Hershey's plain and Hershey's with peanuts. What's the difference? Either way, it's a Hershey's. He's going to lose. He's going to lose Yosef. He's going to lose Binyamin. He's going to lose Binyamin and the brothers. Which would you rather happen?
No man left behind.
What's that?
No man left behind.
No. So what did he gain? What did he gain? The answer is, put yourself in the position of the brothers. Up until this point, there's the feeling, listen, there's retribution in this world. We know what we did wrong. We sold Yosef, and we probably shouldn't have. And, nothing, what goes around comes around, and we're going through all sorts of aggravation over here. And they even feel that even though some of these charges are trumped up charges, but obviously HaKadosh Baruch Hu is behind this while we're going through this aggravation. But Binyamin wasn't there at the sale. Binyamin was the one brother who wasn't there when Yosef was sold. So if all of a sudden they're going home and now he's keeping Binyamin, for sure this has nothing to do with the sale of Yosef, and for sure these are trumped up charges. And not only that, ironically, I once thought to myself, do you know that the Gemara says there are 4 people who died sinless? 4 people never sinned. One of them was Binyamin. So if the brothers knew, they know Binyamin's, he's a good guy. Obviously, it's a trumped up. At this point, Yehuda feels that there's no justification for what's happening, and that's why he gets angry. Now, what's interesting is it says, Vayigash love Yehuda. He approaches him. Vayomer bi Adoni edaber na'avdecha davar be'oznei Adoni. Let me speak in your ear. Now, some say be'oznei Adoni means I want you to understand well what I'm saying. It's like your father says to you, do you hear me? Well, you obviously heard him because he spoke pretty loudly, didn't he? So he doesn't need to know. When your father yells at you and he says, did you hear me? He didn't mean, did you hear me? Because you clearly heard him. What did he mean? Did you understand? So Yehuda wants, he says, number 1, I want you to understand. Number 2, there's an opinion that Yehuda goes over and he talks to Yosef privately. He doesn't want anybody else to hear. And why not? Why doesn't he want anybody else to hear what he's saying to Yosef? So Yehuda's going to go through an entire discourse over here, which even the Ramban says. I don't know why he has to repeat the whole story. But whatever it is, he's going to prove to Yosef that what Yosef is doing is wrong. Now, there's a Gemara that says that there was a certain king, and this king called in his ministers. And he said, if a person has a sore on his foot, he has a painful sore on his foot, should you leave it there and suffer, or should you cut it off and be relieved? And he was obviously referring to the Jewish people. He was an anti-Semite. He said, should I leave him around or should I just cut it off, meaning should we annihilate the Jewish people? So there was a certain man named Katia Bar Shalom. And Katia Bar Shalom, who was one of the Gentiles, he said, listen, you're not going to succeed You're not going to succeed because, number one, the Jewish people are scattered, so you're never going to be able to get all of them. And number two, even if you would, then you're going to be considered a deficient empire. You're going to be an empire that's missing one nation. Can you imagine the United States going from 50 to 49? You're going to become a deficient empire. So the king said, you've spoken well. You're right on 2 counts, but we have a rule in this land. Anybody who bests the king in an argument gets thrown into a fiery furnace. It's one of those lose situations, like marriage. You're right, but you're wrong. So you should figure out how to figure out this. Somebody once said, if you're wrong and you give in, well, if you're wrong, you should give in. If you're right and you give in, you're married. So there's a lot to that, by the way. So he says, well, you've spoken well, my friend, but you got the best of me. It's like when you golf with the boss. Make sure you let the boss win. Just let the boss win. That's not the time to, right? Isn't that a rule? You let the boss win. He says, hey, well, you beat me. We have a rule that as anybody who gets the best of the king gets thrown into a fiery furnace. So this man, the end of the story was that this Katia Bar Shalom, on his way to the furnace, a Roman noblewoman said, well, it's a shame for the ship to pass without paying the tax. Meaning you went to bat for the Jewish people and now you're going to go get killed without joining them. So he then performed an act of self-circumcision, and a heavenly voice came out and said that Katia Bar Shalom has a portion in the world to come. Gemara and Avodah Zarah. With that in mind, Yehuda understood, listen, I'm in public, there's a public forum over here. What I'm about to say to Yosef, I don't want to take any chances here that if I'm right, I'll be wrong. And therefore, he approaches him and he says, let me say this in your ear, just between me and you, so you won't be embarrassed over here. That's why Yehuda approaches him. That's why Zabir Dover Boaz de Adoni. So then Yehuda goes through the entire story with Yosef, and eventually he gets to the point where he says at the bottom of the page, at the bottom of page 250, he says, V'haya kiroso ke'enanar v'mes. When Yaakov Avinu sees that the young man is not here, meaning Binyamin, he'll die. Now some of the commentaries say that what Yehuda was saying was, listen, you're right, we could go home and tell our father that Binyamin's been taken, he was taken captive, and we're going to negotiate for him. We're never going to get that chance. When he sees us riding up to the house, and he's going to be looking out, and he'll see Binyamin isn't there, that right there will never even have a chance to explain to him. That's why it's very precise. It says, V'haya kiroso ke'enanar. When he sees that Binyamin is not with us, we won't even have a chance to explain. We won't be able to go back and go past that. Then, so then we're going to cause our father to go into the, how does he translate it? And go in sorrow to the grave. Now, you'll notice that in Pasuk, where is it? Take a look back a second for Pasuk Chaf Daled on the previous page, page 250. About 9 lines from the top, 10 lines from the top. So Yehuda uses an interesting expression here. It says, Vayihi ki alinu el avdecha avi. It'll be when we go up to your servant, our father, my father. And 5 times in the course of the conversation, he mentions that Yaakov is Yosef's servant. So the Medrash says, because Yosef heard it 10 times, that Yaakov, he heard his father referred to as his servant, and he didn't protest, Yosef died prematurely, 10 years premature. He died at 110, and he was supposed to have lived to 120. He lost 10 years of his life because he heard his father referred to as his servant. What's the obvious question?
What should he have said so as not to raise suspicion?
What's that?
What should he have said so as not to raise suspicion?
He should have somehow figured out how to not let him say that without raising suspicion. What's the obvious question, though?
In the dream, his father was his servant.
But that's a dream. That's not his fault. That's his dream.
But he is technically
But I said it, and I purposely said it quickly. How many times does it appear in the section here? No, appears here 5 times. I said it appears 5 times. He lost 10 years of his life because he heard it 10 times. I double talked. I purposely double talked. I was good at that in high school. I purposely double. I said he heard it 5. It says it 5 times, and he heard it 10 times. Therefore, lost 10 years of his life. So what's the obvious question? Well, is it 5 or 10? In high school, I used to mumble. I'm coming to class late. Kaplan, where were you? Yeah, okay, just sit down. It worked. It worked. I've done it in government offices in Israel too. It works. It works. Whenever you sense that they don't really care what they're asking, it works. It happened. We went into some government office. My wife and I had to go in. There's a security guard because I look suspicious. Where are you going? Tough. It works. It works, you do it. Where do you go to? So what's the obvious question? Come on, guys, what's the obvious question? Was it 5 or 10? There you go. Was it 5 or 10? The answer is it was 5, so why does he get 10? And not only that, the Medrash says he heard it 10 times. Wait, he had a ringing in his ear? Double talk? Why is it 10 times? You guys didn't learn the Parsha. What did it say earlier? Ki hamelitz beinosam. Yosef, there was an interpreter, because Yosef didn't want them to know that he knows Lashon HaKodesh. So he had a son Menashe who was the interpreter, pretending to be, and he kept saying, wait, so he said, our servant, your father, our father, your servant, and Menashe then translated into Egyptian. So Yosef heard it 10 times and he never protested. And therefore he lost 10 years of his life. Number one. Notice it also says Yosef predeceased all his brothers because of the fact that he was in a position of authority. The Gemara says authority buries a person. When you have the authority, when you have a position of power and authority, often it shaves off time from a person's life because of the pressures of the job. Okay. Then Yehuda says, okay, how could I go up to our father and he's not with us? Now comes the drama, the most dramatic moment in the Torah. On page 252, Pasuk Aleph. By the way, okay, let's just go on with it. V'lo yochol Yosef li'isapek l'chol hanitzavim alav. Yosef could not hold back. Now we're talking about the master of holding back. So it must have been pretty intense if Yosef can't hold back. V'lo yochol Yosef, 5 lines on the top, page 252. V'lo yochol Yosef li'isapek l'chol hanitzavim alav. Yosef could not hold back. Vayikra, he calls out, Hotziu kol ish me'aloi. Get everybody out of here. V'lo amar ish ito bizvara Yosef elechav. Nobody was there when Yosef revealed himself to his brothers. So the Meforshim say, first of all, when it says he couldn't hold back, which form of the word couldn't is that? Couldn't means unable, or couldn't, not allowed. Which was it when it says, V'lo yochol Yosef lisapek? Which one is it? He couldn't because he was unable to, or he couldn't because he was not allowed to? Right? Doesn't know what the word. If I say you can't have more chocolate cake, that can mean one of two things. You can't have more because it's bad for you, or you can't have more because I don't allow you to. So which one of the couldn't? V'lo yochol Yosef lisapek. Which one of the couldn't is it? What's that? He was unable to. That seems to be the plain meaning. The Chassam Sofer says Yosef really couldn't at this point, because Yehuda originally said, Ki chamocha kefaro, you are like Paro to me. But 1 second. Paro had said to Yosef when he appointed him, he said, you're going to be in charge of the entire land except my throne is above you. Now you've got somebody coming along and saying, you're just like Paro. That can be interpreted as a rebellion. That means you can't be compared to the king. Kings did not take lightly when there were implications that others are at that level. So Yosef, according to some of the Meforshim, he couldn't hold back. He couldn't afford to hold back at this point, because otherwise Paro is going to be get upset. So Yosef has to make it very clear. No. I'll tell you what's going on here. The plain meaning, what Andrew says, that he couldn't hold back emotionally. He just cannot hold back anymore. Implication that he would have if he could have. Implication he would have if he could have, because he wanted to bring about a fulfillment of the second dreams as well. But at this point, he can't. The dam bursts. He can't. So what does Yosef do? He does two things. He says, everybody out. Sends all the Egyptians out. Everybody get out. Nobody was there when Yosef reveals himself to his brothers. Why not? Why not? What's that? His emotions he's not worried about. His emotions he's not worried about. What's he really worried about? Well, let me ask you a question. I mean, you know, if I would expose you for being a kidnapper who sold me, you know, we're standing in a room full of people over here. We're sitting at a Hanukkah Masiba, and all of a sudden I turn and say, hey, Mike, by the way, this guy, Mike, he sold me. I'm really his long-lost brother. He sold me. Take a bow, Mike, will you? And that could be embarrassing. Yeah. Out of kavod said he did not want. Now look at Yosef. This is what the brothers who sold him, and look at his sensitivity to the brothers. And Yosef, out of sensitivity, and what does he do? Remember, this reminds me of Bill Clinton in Israel. Yeah, Bill Clinton once came to Israel years ago, and when he was president, and so he was staying at the King David Hotel. So the Israelis offered to, you know, set up a security, and there was a lot of security. But for the personal bodyguards, he said he'll stay with the Americans, with the American bodyguards. So he was in a room at the King David Hotel, and the Secret Service guys are there, and there's a crowd of Israelis, of falafel-eating Israelis, you know, who want to get to Bill Clinton. And the room he was in, there was like a side door of some sort that his own Secret Service people had overlooked. And all of a sudden the door opens, and then this crowd of Israelis pours in, and they're surrounding him, and they couldn't get to him for 10 minutes. I think he was away from the Secret Service guys couldn't get to him for 10 minutes. He was out of their jurisdiction, you know, and with a little tchina on him, you know, and so he's left alone with a crowd of Israelis. He's lucky it was a crowd of Israelis. Now, Yosef has got his Secret Service people, he's got his security people, he's got these 10 foreigners sitting in a room with him, all of who are angry at him. And the Medrash says he sends out all the Egyptians, he sends out all his security people, because out of a concern for his brothers, he actually endangered his life at this point. They could have just easily killed him. And there's one opinion that says he was wrong for doing so. But Yosef's sensitivity to his brothers was such that he throws everybody out. Get out, everybody out. He yells, everybody out. And why did he do it? He did it out of sensitivity to his brothers. So it says, Vayikra kol ish v'lo amar ish ito b'izvada Yosef el echav. Nobody was there when Yosef revealed himself to his brothers. Vayitein es kolo bivchi. He starts crying. Vayishmel Mitzrayim vayishma beis Paro. The Egyptians in the house of Paro, they all hear that Yosef is crying. We're going to come back to this pasuk later. Vayomer Yosef el echav. Yosef says to his brother, Ani Yosef, ha'od avichai, I'm Yosef. Is my father still alive? V'lo yochlu echav la'anos oso ki nifalo be part of his brothers. Couldn't answer because they were so petrified. They were so embarrassed. How does the arts go translate nifhalu? I hope they did. Disconcerted. Oh, that's a good parva word. That's a kind of a middle of the line. It's a combination of they were just awestruck. They're just shocked. Total shock. And what can you possibly say? 22 years and a guy suddenly says, "Hi, it's me." What are you supposed to do? How would you feel at that moment? How would you feel at that moment? You don't even know where to turn. You don't know what to say, how to respond. Where do you even begin? Where do you even begin under these circumstances? So they're kind of like, whoa, you ever get those buzzed? You're just, what? That sort of thing. So there's an interesting medrash here. Famous Beis Halevi. It's just so powerful. The medrash says, Oy lanu miyom hadin, oy lanu miyom hatochecha. Woe to us on the day of judgment. Woe to us on the day of rebuke. Oy is not just the Yiddish word that your Zaidi used to say when he sat down in a chair and cracked. Oy, oy. Oy is, by the way, it's when people krechts, like oy vey. You ever see someone who sits down, oy? if somebody once said, that's not honest. Nobody does that when they're alone in a room. It's only when there's somebody else around. I've never krechts when I'm on my own. If I krechts on my own, because it's true pain. But if I'm sitting there when other people are going, oh, that's for public consumption. That's not, that's completely, you never do that for yourself alone. Who am I talking to? You know, if you sometimes, you know, if you bump your head on something, you go, ow, that's already truth. See, the word oy it appears that lemi oy lemi avoy, like that's where we say oyve. The Yiddish from oyve is from two words in nach, oy and avoy. The pasuk in Mishlei, I think, says, "Who groans oy, and who wails avoy." Who goes oy avoy? And the Pasuk goes on to talk about people who have drunk too much, what we call hangovers, or what the I think the Swiss call Katzenjammers. But whatever it is, it's a hangover by any other term. And what it is oy meaning woe. Lemi oy, lemi avoy. So the Medrash says, oy lanu miyom hadin. Woe to us on the day of judgment. Oy lanu miyom hatochecha. Woe to us on the day of rebuke. If Yosef's brothers couldn't respond to him, to his rebuke, and he's only a king of flesh and blood, how will we be able to respond to God Almighty on the day of judgment when he takes us to task and rebukes us? That's the Medrash. That's what the Medrash says. A very famous Medrash. And there's a famous kasha on the Medrash. What's the kasha, gentlemen? So again, I'll tell you the Medrash, and then you'll ask me the kasha. The Medrash says, if Yosef's brothers couldn't respond to his rebuke, how will we be able to respond to the rebuke of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? That's what the Medrash says.
How can we respond to the rebuke of God?
That's what the Medrash says. What's the obvious kasha? Where do you find any rebuke here? Where did Yosef rebuke them? He just revealed himself. Where was the rebuke? The Medrash says he rebuked them. Where was the rebuke? Look at the words. V'yomer Yosef V'yomer Yosef elachav ani Yosef od avichai, I'm Yosef. My father's still alive. V'lo yachol echav lan also so ki follow me. Part of his brothers couldn't respond because they were panic stricken. They were afraid, disconcerted. So where's the rebuke?
The whole process that he put them through?
The whole process he put them through, but it's specifically on this line that the Medrash says it.
They rebuked their assumption of him.
What's that?
They rebuked their assumption of him.
He's rebuking them. Where is there any word of rebuke in that pasuk? Where do you see any rebuke? So the Beis HaLevi says, Yosef was saying to them, you're giving me this whole sob story about we got to take Binyamin home, otherwise my father's going to die. He won't support the shock. Ani Yosef, I'm Yosef. Ha'od avichai, my father's still alive? How come you weren't worried about the shock back then? All of a sudden you're worried? Yeah, that's an ooh. That's a big ooh. Oh, all of a sudden you're worried. All of a sudden you're worried about Dad couldn't handle the shock. Is he still alive now? That you weren't worried about. All of a sudden now you're worried about it. My father, Olav Hashem, was an absolute master at trapping me in contradictions. I was a master, and I needed it too. He asked me to do something. Now I haven't got the energy to mow the lawn. Then there's a phone call. The guys, they got a gym. They rented a gym. They need a 10th guy for a minion for a basketball game. My dad, can I go to? You tell me you don't have energy. You're caught in a contradiction. That's the worst form of rebuke, is a contradiction. The worst form is a self-contradiction. So a person comes up after 120 years, the guy said, dude, did you have tefillin? Tefillin. Tefillin was expensive, $1,000 for a little black box, that. He says, you didn't have trouble buying that little black box for $1,000. What happened with, you had that little black box for $1,000. Well, what happened? That's the self-contradiction. That's the rebuke. Yosef says, Ani Yosef. I'm Yosef. My father's still alive? What are you going to say to that? It's such a joy when you're the guy who does the trapping in that situation. There's nothing better in life. When you just nail somebody like that, there's no greater joy than that. So Yosef, they can't respond, right? Isn't that true? They can't respond. Okay. So then, one of the we have to finish, but I'll just tell you. One of the Mefarshim says, "Ki nivhalu mipanov." What does the word mipanov mean? Face. It really, in context, it means they were before him. But it also literally means mipanov. One of the most enchanting words in Hebrew, by the way, because panim is your face, right? What does it mean? In that, panim is the inside. Very strange that the most external part of a person's body should be called the inside. The face is the most basic part. It's what you look at in a person. You look at his face. Yet the panim is the pnim, because the face reflects what's going on inside. The face often is a reflection. You can take a look at a person. Not every day, some people are better at this than others, but you can sometimes look at a person and you could see that this is not really a trustworthy person, or something about him looks immoral, or something about him looks like it's tzaddik. It's a reflection of what's going on inside. In many cases, the face is a reflection. So it says that Yosef, what happened? All of a sudden they see Yosef for who he is. All along they've been looking at him. And all of a sudden they see Yosef for who he is. And they realize, wow, this is Yosef. Wow. What a tzaddik. All of a sudden they're looking and they're seeing the righteousness of Yosef. And they're thinking back, we sold him. We sold him. I mean, could you imagine? You sold somebody and you realize it was, selling Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Like, whoa, we didn't realize. So suddenly the ramifications of what you've done are suddenly hitting you. And it's all hitting at one moment. Okay, we have to stop here. We'll continue Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow. Rabbi Wiener is giving a talk now. Thank you very much, Moshe.